Welcome to the silent personalities before crowns glittered in portraits, and before history hardened into dates and footnotes. There was a boy who inherited a broken kingdom in a silence full of danger. Imagine England not as a single nation, but as a restless patchwork of loyalties. Scars from Viking fires still warm in the soil, borders drawn with swords rather than ink. Into this uneasy quiet stepped Edmund, later called Edmund I, a king remembered less for spectacle and more for the steady, almost invisible strength that holds a collapsing wall upright when everyone else has already walked away. This is not the story of a loud conqueror or a legendary hero sung endlessly by poets. This is the story of endurance, restraint, and power that speaks softly but reshapes the future. Edmund was born around the year 921, a grandson of Alfred the Great, a name so towering it could easily have crushed the generations that followed. Alfred had saved Wessex, preserved learning, and imagined an England that could exist beyond survival. Edmund's father, Edward the Elder, expanded that vision with relentless discipline, pushing borders northward and tightening control over former Viking territories. When Edward died in 924, Edmund was still a child, watching older forces move the world for him. His half-brother Æthelstan took the throne and did something unprecedented. He became the first king to rule what could truly be called England. By the time Edmund inherited the crown in 939, England existed, but only just. It was young, fragile, and surrounded by enemies who believed it would not last. Æthelstan's death was like a sudden removal of the keystone from an arch. The north erupted almost immediately. Viking rulers, Irish Norse kings, and Scottish forces sensed weakness. Olaf Guthfrithson seized York, tearing Northumbria away from English control. Edmund was barely 18 years old when he became king, and the realm he inherited was already slipping through his fingers. This is where the character of Edmund begins to emerge, not in triumph, but in response to loss. Where another ruler might have rushed headlong into disaster, Edmund moved with careful aggression, learning when to strike and when to wait. Edmund's reign was defined by reconquest, but not the dramatic kind celebrated in heroic epics. His wars were methodical, patient, and often brutal in their necessity. The north was a tangle of shifting allegiances, where yesterday's ally could be tomorrow's invader. Edmund understood that reclaiming land was not enough. He had to bind it to his authority in a way that would last. He fought Olaf and later Olaf's cousin, Olaf Sitrickson, not once but repeatedly, as Northumbria slipped in and out of English control like a tide that refused to obey the moon. One of the most telling moments of Edmund's rule came not from the battlefield, but from diplomacy sharpened by threat. In 945, Edmund marched into Strathclyde, a British kingdom in what is now southwestern Scotland. Rather than annex it outright, he blinded the sons of its king and handed control of the territory to Malcolm I of Scotland, in exchange for alliance and cooperation. By modern standards, the act is shocking, cruel, and deeply unsettling. Yet in the language of 10th century politics, it was a calculated move, designed to neutralize future resistance and stabilize a volatile border. Edmund was not a merciful king, but he was a practical one, and practicality in his time often wore the face of violence. Despite this hardness, Edmund was not merely a war leader. He ruled alongside powerful advisors, most notably Archbishop Oda of Canterbury, a figure of immense influence and moral authority. Together, they worked to strengthen royal law and order. England in Edmund's time was plagued by feuds, blood vengeance, and cycles of private justice that undermined royal authority. Edmund issued law codes aimed at curbing these practices, insisting that disputes be settled through compensation and legal process, rather than endless retaliation. This was not idealism, it was governance. A kingdom at war with itself could never survive its external enemies. Edmund also continued the tradition of supporting monasteries and the church, not purely out of piety, but because he understood their role as stabilizing forces. Monasteries were centers of literacy, record-keeping, and administration. In a world where memory was power, the written word could legitimize rule as effectively as an army. By backing reform and religious authority, Edmund reinforced the idea that kingship was not just about force, but about order sanctioned by something higher than violence alone. Yet for all his efforts, Edmund's life was brief, and its ending was abrupt, almost cruelly ironic. In 946, at the age of about 25, Edmund attended a feast at Pucklechurch in Gloucestershire. During the celebration, a dispute broke out involving a known outlaw named Leffa. Edmund intervened personally, perhaps out of instinct, perhaps out of kingly duty. perhaps out of youthful confidence. In the struggle that followed, Leffe stabbed Edmund, killing him. The king, who had faced Viking armies and navigated the treacherous politics of a fractured realm, died not in battle, but in a moment of domestic violence, cut down in the middle of peace. His death shocked the kingdom. There was no long illness, no time for careful preparation, no grand final speech. Edmund was gone in an instant, leaving the throne to his brother Edred. And yet, what Edmund left behind was more enduring than his short reign might suggest. He had reclaimed the North. He had reinforced the authority of the crown. He had helped shape a legal and political culture that valued central rule over fragmented vengeance. The England Edred inherited was stronger, more cohesive, and more capable of surviving the storms still to come. History often favors the dramatic, the long-lived, the conquerors who leave behind monuments and legends. Edmund I did not fit comfortably into that mold. His reign was short, his personality largely silent in the sources, his achievements often overshadowed by those before and after him. And yet, when we look closely, we see a king who ruled at a critical hinge of history, when England could just as easily have shattered back into rival kingdoms. Edmund held that fragile structure together not with grandeur, but with resolve. He was a bridge between visions, between Alfred's dream of an educated, resilient kingdom and the later consolidation that would make England recognizable as a unified state. His story reminds us that history is not only shaped by those who shout the loudest, but also by those who stand firm in moments of uncertainty, making hard decisions that leave no songs behind, only consequences. So when the noise of history fades and the banners and battles blur into abstraction, Edmund remains a quiet figure in a dangerous age, not a legend carved in gold, but a king etched into the foundation of a nation. And in that silence, if you listen carefully, you can hear the truth history often forgets to say out loud. Sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that never needed to shout.